Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and this is episode 258, where we're going to be talking about how to quit your job to go full-time dev. All right, now, quitting your job to go full-time dev can be a, frightening thought. There's a lot to consider, but most importantly, is it the right move to make, and what's the best way to go about making that commitment? Thankfully, our guest today, Bruno Bonbardi, has gone through this process twice and shares his reasons, how prepared he was, and other considerations to be mindful of when you're ready to quit your job and go full-time dev. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back, and today with me I have Bruno Bonbardi. Bruno, how's it going, my friend?
Hey Andrew, thanks for having me. All
Of
is good.
course. Of course. Well, I wanted to quickly take a moment just for you to introduce yourself, tell everybody, what is it you do, what are you making, because there's a lot of stuff that we're going to want to find out more about, but for right now, just share a little bit about yourself, your what you're doing with your games, the company or studio you're working with, and then also just provide some things that you like to do in your spare time when you're not making games.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I've been a software developer for almost 12 years, and I had made some video games in the past, but just some weeks ago, I decided to transition into full indie game development.
Hmm.
I'm originally from Argentina. Now I'm living in England. Yeah, so the game which I'm working on is called Dun Jungle. It's a 2D action roguelite where you play as a monkey rescuing its human who got lost exploring jungle temples and dungeons.
Oh wow, that sounds pretty cool. Nice. And what we're going to get into in a moment is this is something you're, for the most part, working completely full time on, correct?
Yes, for the most part, yes. I'm also doing some freelance stuff to
All right.
support myself.
Sweet. And outside of when you're doing some freelance and working primarily on this project, what do you like to do in your free time?
But of course, I like to play video games as well.
Nice.
It's one of my main passions. But also, I'm very social, so I constantly hang out with friends. Just, yeah, do some.
And
I like to. I'm a good host, I think. I like to have people over a lot. And
nice.
yeah, mostly maybe we play some tabletop games and such.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's something I need to do more of is get some people, just a few people over to play some more tabletop games for sure. And probably make more time to play video games. So that's awesome that you get to do that and make time for that because I'm sure you're busy with everything else that you're doing.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder actually, but I try to make the time for it.
Awesome. That's great to hear, and it's important to do. So I'm glad that you're doing it. All right. So before we get into our discussion, because I'm sure a lot of people are really curious about how you went about this and your whole process and everything, I'm going to have you go through the Q-Box round. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Q-Box round is just a series of random questions I prepared for Bruno here. And Bruno, you're just going to answer them as quickly as you can, but feel free to elaborate if you need to. So,
All right.
are you ready for the Q-Box round?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. If you could be any animal, what would it be?
A blue whale, because it gets to go to unexplored places of the ocean.
Ooh, I like that one. What is your most influential or inspiring game?
From the later generations, I'd say Dark Souls.
Okay,
I mean, yeah, it gets me very invested, and it kind of takes me back to when I was a kid playing games.
nice. I like
In
that. reasoning.
Yeah, in that sense that I'm really into it, and maybe I stop playing, I still thinking about the game, you know.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. All right. Ice cream or pudding?
Pudding.
Ah, interesting choice.
Yeah, not a very ice cream person, to be honest.
A bonus one here. What's your favorite pudding?
Oh, caramel, I think. I mean, I'm from Argentina. We have flan
Oh,
with
yep,
dulce de
yep.
leche there and cream, and it's just my favorite dessert.
Ah, I've had some flan before, and it was really good, but I know I didn't have the best, so I'll have to try some authentic uh, flan from Argentina sometime in the future, or at least someone who's from there that knows how to make it well.
Yeah, totally. You definitely need dulce de leche there.
Ah, all right. uh, Zoo or aquarium?
Aquarium.
Yeah, I figured that might be the case, considering your animal would be a blue whale.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And last but not least, a staple here on the show is what game are you playing now?
Right now I'm playing Going Under. Do you know it? It's a very fun roguelite with a cool humor style. Very, very fun and casual.
Nice. So fun, casual roguelike. I like that. Um, yeah, I right off the top of my head, I'm not recalling it, but so I'll definitely need to check that out then. Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that information. It's it was pretty interesting to learn more about you on that front. Great answers. So, but now we're going to go right into the meat of our discussion here, which is the topic of how to quit your job and go full time dev. Now, I think this is really interesting topic because a few episodes ago, I think it was episode 252, we had Thomas Brush on here, who also talks about going full time dev, and it's based off of his own take and how he did it and everything. So I thought this was really interesting because with you. It probably have a little bit different story than Thomas Brush has, which I would assume everybody would have a different story from the next person, right? So, to kick off our conversation, I want to ask you because I think this is something everybody is asking themselves who are considering quitting their job to do game dev full time is when is the right time to quit your job?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's easy to feel that there is actually never a right time to quit your job.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard, but I'd say if you're unhappy with what you do and it's clear to you what would make you happy, and maybe you know it's possible to make a living of it, then you should go for it. Yeah, also it's good if you know you can fall back to your old job. In my case, I could.
Hmm.
So in case it doesn't work out, you have other options, you know.
No, that's a good reason because I think that happens a lot where people don't necessarily weigh in on the happy factor, right? Because when it comes to bills and things like that, that can be a very important factor and almost like creating a fear factor, if you will, where if I don't have this. So to the second part to your point, and I know you mentioned about also doing some freelance too, which we'll get into in a moment. Um, you mentioned too about having something to fall back on. So if you don't mind, could you elaborate a little further in terms of how are you able to fall back on your old job, and what was your old job, if you don't mind sharing?
Sure. Yeah. Well, actually, I was a software developer, um, more exactly a Salesforce developer.
Okay, cool.
I had a very good relationship with my coworkers and just the company I worked for. So if I wanted to go back, I know they would take me in.
Okay, cool. So, and I think that says a lot too, because like establishing those relationships, not just with your coworkers, but with the company as well, and you probably went in setting those expectations with them, or at least starting those conversations to have. So. In your case, you just have the ability where they'd probably welcome you back, and I think the state with development and just as a whole and in general, makes it probably a little bit easier for you too. But let's say just your own thoughts in general for someone who might be in an environment that's not as hasn't been able to set the same expectations that you were able to set with your employer. Let's say it's just more of a toxic place, or just not something they would have the same option as you. Was there anything else you'd recommend to someone else if they're still considering quitting their job, and what would be like an alternative to that they could possibly fall back onto?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have it so clear, but well, it kind of also depends on the market, right? If you're a developer, it will probably be easy for you to find another job.
Mm.
I think that. And if not, maybe just before leaving your job, maybe try to have some other side job on the line just to support yourself. Um, I mean, or
No,
maybe consider going part-time
right. Okay.
instead of just quitting.
Yep. No, I think those are actually awesome suggestions there. And in fact, for me specifically, I kind of went on a similar path where I had something on the side, which was essentially RenGen, and I was actually starting similar conversations or considering, hey, about part time and things like that. So I that's your suggestions are something I can relate to directly, and I think they're also really good alternatives for anybody who's considering, hey, I'm passionate about this. I know it has some viability, and before I take that next step, though, I want to make sure these things are in place. But
Yeah, totally. I did that myself. I was working part-time before I quit my job
mm,
for about 4 months. So I got to taste it before going full in, you know?
see, I love that because and that's okay. I absolutely love that. We're going to get into, I think, a little bit of that too, because that transition kind of helped validate things for you to know if, hey, is this going to be a good fit for me or not? Because sometimes I think people who just quit, as I don't know how far this expression goes, but cold turkey, meaning they stop instantly.
Yeah.
Um, like they might find that, oh, I'm not as organized as I thought I would be, or all these other things, and or overwhelmed, or any number of reasons. So I absolutely love that you share that, because it's a very important point, and I think it's a smart way to go about it, because it can be exciting to quit your job, and then sometimes reality can set you in, or set you back, or it all depends, I guess, on preparedness. So speaking of preparedness, let's go in a slightly different direction here in terms of determining what's the best way to quit your job. So, I mean, you gave some insight, and actually, if I remember correctly, this is basically is this the second time you've quit your job, because you've worked on a project before, which was Trials of Azra, and you're currently working on the Jungle. So, I guess take yourself back to that first time you were planning on quitting your job, and then you did. How prepared were you when you did that initially to focus on developing Trials of Azra?
Yeah, that was a whole different story. Let's let's get into that. I was not very prepared at all. But in that time, I was young. I was living with my parents, so I didn't have a lot of bills
Mm.
to pay, sorry. Yeah, and just I was working for about 2 years, just managed to save up and just went for it. I mean, we were three friends who wanted to make a video game. We got programming skills and art skills, and we just went for it. Just the three of us every day in a garage. But it was really improvised, the whole thing. We played it by ear, you know.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like it was more of uh I wouldn't say it was on a whim, because I mean, like you said, you worked for a couple years, you saved up money, so you definitely did have you were definitely prepared to go in that direction. But even so, as you mentioned, and you had some benefits of living with your family and things like that. But even so, there's probably a lot of things that you didn't plan on or anticipate by doing this. I guess what was some of the things that caught you off guard that you didn't expect when you made that move?
Yeah, well, I think one of the main things, or the biggest, maybe, yeah, the biggest thing, is that we started with a ambitious project. I mean, a really big game we wanted to make, and just kept planning stuff we would have to add. And well, it took 2 years to realize we were not gonna finish that project.
Mm,
It was not Trials of Alpha Score, of course. It was a previous project called Bessel that we had to cancel. And yeah, so we were very stressed out because we were not getting results, and one of the team members just abandoned the team.
mm.
So we felt that we could not continue with that game, and with my other partner, we kind of regrouped and planned a game a bit more little, which is Trials of Asra, and we spent another year making that one, but this time it was more carefully planned and less ambitious.
Nice. Yeah, it's like if there's a common denominator I hear, just other people out there talking to, especially first time devs, it's the one, like a common piece of advice that's out there is don't make the project too ambitious. And it sounds like that was really, even though it was about 2 years of time, it was still ended up being a very valuable experience. And I think that's really important too, because I know a lot of the questions I prepared aren't necessarily directed towards this, but clearly what you're saying too is having a good sense of the vision of the project and making sure it's within a reasonable scope for, I guess, your team size and the skill sets and everything else that you have. Because that took 2 years of time to figure out it wasn't going to work. Um,
Yeah.
eh, but you came back from that with Trials of Azra, and then you guys made that game in a year, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it was definitely not a waste of time. We learned a lot in those 2 years, and if I see it now, seeing back, yeah, I take it as a learning experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say so too, because I mean, I think that says a lot too. Like, just it was 2 years to develop this one project, and then the next project you implemented, you cut that time in half. So I think that in itself is a success right there. Not to mention in terms of anything else that you've might have gained after its release and things like that. So going through that process, how was it then this time around, before you started to? Because okay, well, actually, let's. I understand there might be a gap here, and I want to make sure we address it. A gap in terms of you released Trials of Azura. What happens after that? Did you go back to work? And then at what point did you start creating Dun Jungle?
Yeah. So after Trials of Asra, well, it was not a commercial hit. I was very happy with the game. I think it was well received, but it was just uh, not a commercial success. I mean, I could not live off it. So yeah, I came back to work in an office, just not related to game dev.
Hmm.
And
And then at what
oh,
point did you start Dun Jungle? So you released the game, you went back to work, and then how long was it until you started your current project?
well, it was like 4 years, I think. I mean, 4 years into this new company.
Hmm. Okay.
which was great. I mean, I was working with friends, really having a good time. But then the pandemic hit, you
Yep.
know. I suddenly was at home having a lot of spare time, and I got into game dev again. And I remember how much I liked it, and I started to have a lot of fun with it to the point which my current work was not motivating me anymore. I wanted to make games and not just develop in Salesforce or whatever.
Awesome.
And so yeah, I started working in Don Jungle just at my spare time, and then I talked about going part time in the company, which I could, and yeah, just slowly putting more and more time and energy into Don Jungle until the point I decided to go full time.
And I think that's probably, I mean, especially in people in wherever circumstances they're in and everything. But I think in your case, it was kind of, could you say it was helpful to have that time to kind of like take a break from development, but then essentially like rediscover that passion again? Because it sounds like it gave you enough of a recharge in a way to really tackle the current project on Jungle head on, so to speak. Do you think that time though was helpful?
Yes, I mean, I think it was helpful. I don't know what would have happened if I continue with game dev after Trials of Asra. Just life took me to a yeah, to another path.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't very much planned. Um, I don't know. It's hard to answer. I mean,
Oh yeah, of course.
I would really like to know where would I be now if I continued my journey through game dev. But I think I'm in a good place, so I have no regrets taking that break from game dev.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, and I would say in most cases like that, I don't think people should, because again, like time away sometimes, because the potential issue here, of course, is like if you're really passionate and put all that energy nonstop, you only have so much after a while. I mean, everybody has, I'm sure, different levels, right,
Yeah,
of their passion meter, if you will. But it can be draining, and the last thing you want to have happen is just to get burnt out. But so throughout that process and everything else, and when you finally made the transition to go part time and then now full time, essentially, um, what was that process like in terms of being prepared for making this move? How did it differ from when you first decided to quit your job and go full time?
well, this time I have already a big portion of the game already developed.
Nice.
I yeah i i learned how to be more organized. I have my calendar set with milestones. I play tested early. I'm happy with what I have right now with the game, and I'm keeping the scope doable for just one person.
Mm,
And well, yeah, that already is a lot different. And also I have freelance work on the side and just helping with my girlfriend's business to basically to pay the bills.
nice.
So I'm taking it, I would say, more slowly, not putting that much pressure in having the game be a success.
Right. It
Yeah, so it's not as draining as before, I would say.
and I think that's a key component, because one thing that I think developers, especially developers with only their first game or even a couple, it's about sustainability, right? Especially if you're
Yeah.
going full time. And, and I know we talked about this on the show before too with other guests, but finding other means to being sustainable. And not only that, I think it's kind of like what we were talking with about you taking that break and then getting back into it. by you helping out in different things, like with your girlfriend's business, with you doing some side work and stuff, in addition to development, it's enough that yes, you're taking it a little bit slowly, but still you're being sustained to meet the bills and everything else that you need to live, but still having enough. You're doing enough of those things to make that work, and then also having still, it sounds like, a good portion of your time dedicated to the project, which you absolutely love. So it sounds like you're having like a really good balance there, which I think is really interesting because, like you said, you're not going as full force before with the project, but it makes sense because it's just you, pretty much,
Yes.
right, doing the project. So yeah, I like that approach that you're taking. I mean, I'm sure other people could, disagree in some senses and stuff, but I think with your history and your experience before, you're not necessarily either concerned that this is going to be a project that's going to last you years either. And plus, I've seen what you've had so far, and actually, that's how we started talking was on Twitter. But like the type of progress you made with that, with the game and the state it's in, it's looking really good too. So
Well, thank you.
yeah, of course. Now you mentioned about we talked about how you're able to supplement your income. I'm just a little bit curious for freelance stuff. What type of stuff are you doing, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, it's mostly programming.
Okay.
Yeah, coding. I would like to do as well some pixel art work, some animations, but still I haven't started getting much work
Hmm.
on that side yet. But yeah, I'm kind of beside coding, trying to explore more artistic sides. And I think having some freelance work related to art also will make me improve the art for my own game. So I'm trying to get a bit of that as well.
Nice. Now, and I like how you're also trying to do things like you're doing different things, but you're trying to focus on areas that you probably enjoy a little bit more too. And maybe that might not produce as much income as other things that you have skill sets and experience to, but you're still making that a point to do the things you really enjoy. And again, it kind of goes to your whole approach or your messaging from the beginning, which was, you know, do whatever you can to find something you're happy with or know that. And I think that's I think is just a really smart way to go about doing things. And too often we think that we can't do those types of things, but I think you're living proof that you can.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's really, really, really important. I mean, I think you have to know when you wake up that you want to go through your work day. I wasn't feeling like going to work in my old company anymore, so that really made me, yeah, just take the decision.
Excellent. Now, as we're talking about like different ways to supplement income and you're probably really involved with a lot of different things in general. I mean, as you stated, helping your girlfriend's business and working on a project and freelancing. Um, I'm sure it has come up where there has been distractions in general, and then there's just distractions from life too. So I'm just curious, were there any distractions that you faced, as you, especially now, let's focus more on the present while you're working on this project. Are there any distractions you faced um, that you think surface now that you have kind of like more 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 time or that you're focusing more on this project?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm still learning to balance my freelance work and stuff with my game project. I mean, sometimes I can spend too much time on one thing just because I want to finish something. So yeah, maybe I still need to improve my time management skills. I'm working on that, but I cannot think of any particular distractions right now.
Oh,
Just general stuff.
yeah. But that's an important point too, because sometimes, like, and this is something I face myself too, is you might be working on one thing and really focus on that, but by devoting too much time on that one area, that could itself become a distraction, but it might not feel that way because, you know, but it's still part of the project. It still needs to get done, right? But if you're solely focused on one thing or spend too much time on it, that itself could serve a distraction. So
Yeah.
I think it's important that you outlined, like, the time management aspect of things too, because that's, I'm sure, very key to make sure you stay on point, hit those milestones, everything else.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm also curious too, kind of more on the emotional side, I guess, in a way, or and stuff. Nothing crazy here, but did you ever come across any moments of like uncertainty, doubt, or anything else that might have made it a challenge to stay focused? Because I'm sure everybody has these feelings at some point when they decide to do something full force and full time.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are definitely some moments when I maybe get inside my head too much.
Mm.
I kind of can get the imposter syndrome, you know of it.
Yep.
And yeah, when that happens, I just learn to go get some air, regroup, maybe talk to friends, family, girlfriend, whatever, and focus again. It's important to just gain some perspective, not, uh, I mean, just keep inside your head all day when that happens.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Because again, like we all have our moments like that, and it's funny too because sometimes we look at others or others that we look up to, whether they be other successful, like, I don't know, just throwing random things out, influencers in this space or celebrities or any number of people that have, or entities that have a really big following. um, Everybody has those moments, and it's probably and so I think people who don't necessarily have those, like that type of clout, let's say, um, then they feel that they put more of a burden, I think, on their shoulders, of uncertainty and things like that. But to your point, yeah, taking that step back and regrouping, and maybe it's more of a break or whatever, and just like don't get inside your head so much. And what I call this too is actually the what if game, right? If you're always asking yourself what if, and they're all in the terms of negative, um, thoughts, then chances are, like, it's gonna be like it's not healthy to think that way. So to get out of your head, take a fresh breath, like you said. I really like that approach.
Yeah, I think it's key.
All right, so let's see here. My screen just went blank on me for a second. Um, so with that in mind, and being really focused, and finding ways to limit your distractions, and just to make sure you're really on cue and at your best. How I mean, what do you anticipate in terms of what the success may look like for your game? Like, have you ever thought about what that might look like? How is it tribute? I mean, just kind of like, what do you do from a projecting standpoint, based off of what you've been doing right now?
Yes. If I understand the question correctly, I think what I am doing to like find success with my new game.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I'm not rushing it, I'm doing everything consciously and just putting love into it, getting the game early to play test and refine the core mechanics, which maybe I failed to do with Trials of Asra. We were really focused on finishing the game, and maybe we lacked some, um, yeah, to tackle those things early on,
Mm.
just to play test it and refine and build a strong core.
Yeah, I think that's good that you say that, because, like, well, and first too, I want to point out that, you know everybody defines their own means of success, right? But I think what's important, how you defined yours, was simply really, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you'll agree, is really creating a very good experience for players by doing all those other things that you mentioned, and putting the thought into that too, because at the core, if you're focusing on those things, regardless of whatever the final outcome is, everything, and you know, there's only so much we can predict or project, right? we can't foretell the future, but I think putting the effort and time into those key areas, as you mentioned, and again, focusing on that player experience is probably going to lead you closer to however you envision that success to be, and everything else. And it's always something that you can learn from further on. As you have learned in the past of all the other things, it's still a good process, and one I think you're treating with the right lens.
Yeah, and I think whether the game is a success commercially or not, a success for me would be if I enjoyed the whole process.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of times too, people forget that aspect of it. But the whole creation process, and to work towards, you know, whatever people think of as success is a process of iteration, right? Um, there are no such things as overnight successes.
yeah,
It just appears that way because when someone has finally paid their dues and put all the time, energy, and effort into a project, and then if all goes well, get notice, it will be like, oh, no one ever heard of this person until all of a sudden everybody heard them about them at once. And that's why we think of these things as overnight successes, when the truth is it was always hard work behind it.
yeah.
But just no one knew about these people before when they were putting in all the work. So, no, I really, really like your approach to that, because and it's something I try to not necessarily preach, but emphasize, because it's I just personally feel, and it sounds like you're with me on this, that it's just the right path to go, is to make sure, you said it in the beginning, just make sure you're happy, and do things for the right reasons.
Yeah, 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 totally.
All right, so let's move on a little bit before we close here about lessons learned. So, you mentioned a little bit, but maybe like pick out some key things here. Like, what type of things did you learn from your first project, that you applied when you started working on Dun Jungle full time?
Yeah. Well, so maybe a bit on the technical side. Maybe it sounds obvious, but well, like I already said, being mindful when building the core. If
Mm,
it's strong and well structured, it makes it easier to add content later and customization without having headaches, you know.
yep.
So I'm doing that with Dun Jungle, just building a strong core. And on the time management side, just learn to not get obsessed and enjoy the whole game making process. Don't put a lot of pressure in on myself on the game. That's key. I mean, as we emphasize a lot, just happiness is key.
Awesome. Now, this might be a tough one to answer, but I'm just curious, just from your own opinion and everything else, would there be any reason why you would convince someone not to quit their job, or perhaps reconsider their decision?
Yeah, so main reason would be if they depend heavily on the paycheck.
Mm,
I mean, that's always a reason to think about it, of course. If that's the case, maybe try having an independent side project first and see how you do. Or like I did, consider first transitioning into part-time.
yeah, no, again, great way to go about it, but still, like, having someone ask that question, it's like, okay, well, and this is funny because a lot of times I don't think we associate these things with like regular lifestyle, living, household type stuff. Like, okay, what are you bringing in? How much of that are you actually living off of? And just doing a quick analysis, budget analysis of like what are your lifestyle habits and things like that, and how does that contribute to what you ultimately want to do? Because like going a little bit further and doing that actual work can really help you identify if this is going to be the right move, essentially what you're saying. So yeah, no, I think that's a really good reason to really like examine yourself and if it's worthwhile and can work and have a plan around that. All right. And then based on what you learned from before and what you are learning now, what's your game plan in terms of moving forward with future projects? So beyond Dun Jungle, what's your, and you don't have to lay everything out, but like, I guess essentially, what's your 5-year plan? What do you see yourself doing in the future after Dun Jungle?
Well, of course, as many game developers, I keep having ideas which I write down. So there are a lot of games that are waiting to be created. But yeah, as long as I can continue to work steadily in games, I would be happy with that. Right now, I'm continuing to work on the jungle. I will, while being sustainable, of course. As you said, that is key. And I'm happy right now with what I'm doing. So in 5 years, if I'm still doing the same, I would be totally okay with it.
Nice. That's a great way to look at it and everything. So, and of course, like life can change, right? But for right now, as you foresee it, and going at the pace and everything else, it seems like as long as you move forward with everything, you're probably still going to keep making games at the same way, or I shouldn't say same way, probably just always improving and reiterating along the ways, just to make things better and improve upon them, and still find lots of ways to enjoy that.
Yeah.
That's so comforting. Awesome. All right. So I really appreciate, sharing your lessons learned and kind of like the tips associated with those questions as well. So before we close, I would love for you to share more information about like where people can find out more about Dun Jungle, or even Trials of Azra. Do you have a website? And what's the best way people can reach out to contact you if they wanted to reach out to say hi or whatever?
Yeah, I definitely need to do a landing page. That's my to-do list still. But definitely people can follow me on Twitter. I'm most active there at Bruno Bonbardi.
Okay.
It's my Twitter tag.
All right.
Or on Instagram also at grumo.gamedev. If people follow me there, yeah, they will learn all about, or there is about Dun Jungle and any project I might be working on in the future.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time you spent with us today and sharing what it was, what this whole process was like, and the fact that you're doing it again. Like that's, I think, just awesome. So again, can't thank you enough for being here on the show and sharing your story with our listeners.
No, thank you for having me.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. If you enjoy and value the show's content, you can support us even more by going to Patreon and visiting www.patreon.com/IGM podcast and select the tier that best suits your needs. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.